Good morning on the West Coast, good afternoon on the East Coast, and happy days everywhere in between. Today is Wednesday, November 29th, and as always, I always say it's a beautiful day to have a webinar. I'm John Yarrington, CEO of the Performance Driven Marketing Institute, a 501c6 not-for-profit trade association dedicated to promoting, protecting, and advancing the direct-to-consumer and performance-driven marketing industries. And on behalf of the entire PDMI family, it's my pleasure to welcome you back to yet another fun-filled an exciting episode of the PDMI Take 20. As a reminder, the PDMI Take 20 is a quick-hitting roundtable discussion led by industry experts on trending topics, all in 20 minutes or less. Today, we're joined by a quartet of incredibly talented leaders from the industry, including Emma Blaser of Venable, Dan Bucko of iMarket Solutions, Paul Mosenson of NuSpark Consulting, and David Tiberia of Bluewater. And together, we'll be discussing how performance brands and their vendors can navigate the shifting landscape on data collection and privacy. However, before we get started, please allow me to do a little housekeeping. If you'd like to ask a question, and we encourage you to do so, please use the control panel located on the right-hand side of your computer screen. Also, please know you're all welcome to ask questions throughout today's conversation, but we will hold all replies to the end of today's discussion. Alrighty, folks. With that said, it's my pleasure to introduce today's moderator. He once brought a knife to a gunfight just to even the odds. He's the fearless Chris Foster. Chris Foster is the Vice President of New Business Development of Modern Postcard, a direct marketing agency located in Carlsbad, California. In addition to his day job, Chris teaches brand strategies at UCSD extension courses, and he's the chairperson of the PDMI's Brand Response Council. As always, Chris, it's a pleasure to have you here today. Thank you so much. And for the 79th time, because today is the 79th episode, take it away, my friend. Take it away.
Nice. Thank you, Johnny. What a terrific send-off, and a happy holidays to everybody on the panel and to everybody watching episode number 79. We're so glad you can be here. So excited to talk about this new behavior for opt-ins and the changing landscape of consumer data. So since the very first email subscription form, the conversation of how much and what kind of data to give in online environments continues to change. When iOS made the move to how consumers could be tracked via apps, it gave everyone kind of a new awareness of what they wanted to share in that space. And now every website you go to has a little banner at the bottom that says, hey, it's going to be cookies, you accept or reject, and everyone usually accepts and moves on, but it gives customers a choice of their online experience. So we're in this world now where the communication between a brand and its users about what data is being given for what kind of payoff they're going to get seems to be more transparent than ever. And we have a new generation of buyers. They're coming of age in a time when they know their data is being used for marketing, but they still have complete control over what they give. So what are we learning? Are we seeing new behaviors? Do consumers just move through QR codes and forms without thinking? Are multi-channel experiences increasing or decreasing opt-in rates? We're going to talk with these panel of experts. We're going to dive in, and so excited to get started. So Dan, we're going to start with you from a designer's perspective. Clearly, you've had to make some adjustments. How are your opt-in forms and experiences to get data changed in the last several years?
Yeah, thanks. Obviously, getting folks to fill out forms is difficult. Unlike the movie, if you build it, they don't necessarily come. So what we've done is we've used a lot of coordinated multi-channel tactics, reach campaigns, different types of media, all driving to a landing page to get folks to fill out forms. And it's all about engagement and being transparent. We have actually kind of swung back to doing a lot more traditional media, buying email lists with all the email spamming and SMS and phone call regulations has made it a little bit more, I think, at least from my perspective, advantageous to use some traditional media to buy lists and drive folks to web pages through multi-channel marketing, a lot of direct mail, some print ads and things like that. And then obviously once they're there on the landing page, minimizing those inputs, right? Figuring out what that trade-off is for how much data you can collect versus how much someone's willing to give away, especially if it's personal and identifiable information. And again, just being authentic and transparent about how you're going to use that data, trying to take it in and use it in a way that's going to increase their customer experience and, make people, feel like that experience is getting better and build that trust. So that's typically what we've been doing and what we've seen.
So I like that. I like that concept, Dan, because you can't really know what you ask for until you ask for it, right? If you have, give me your email and phone number and address, maybe it's too much. If just give me your email and then later on I might get those other pieces of information, that's something we can work on. But you just said something about the privacy issue, and I'd like to go ask you, brands seem like they're more aware of privacy, compliance, and best practices. They seem to be. You might have different discussions with your clients and you're like, what are you doing? But they seem to be doing that. Do you think that they're moving to a place in 2024 where there's more double opt-ins and maybe easier opt-out behaviors and just being a little bit more aware and compliant with privacy issues?
Well, I'll start by saying that I think our clients are very aware of privacy compliance. That's why they work with us. In terms of double opt-ins, to be honest, no, I'm not seeing that very much. From a US perspective, right, the US overall is still primarily an opt-out regime. There are exceptions, of course, but overall, typically, for most data processing that requires some type of choice, we're talking about an opt-out. And so we're happy to work with our clients, of course, if they want to offer an opt-in or a double opt-in as a courtesy, but in general, it's typically not required. Now, there might be some other considerations for global brands, right? If they want to take a uniform approach, of course, we can always help people work through that. But generally, we're not seeing a shift toward opt-in because it increases the friction, right? And sometimes even consumers don't like it, and the brands don't like it. So if it's not required and it's not really helping anyone, then we don't see a lot of it happening. And in terms of easier opt-outs, I would say that our clients had easy opt-outs to begin with, but they're becoming more and more aware of the opt-outs that are required by law. Of course, new laws are coming online later this year, next year, the next couple of years. We have a series of state laws, right, with opt-out requirements. So we're just helping people move forward with those, and they're becoming increasingly common.
Excellent, thank you. And I will get back to later on about some of the legislation that's coming up. But before we do that, Paul, Dan talked about kind of a multi-channel or omni-channel approach in terms of gathering some information. Clearly, in an omni-channel campaign, a prospect's going to get multiple touches, right? How do you advise brands manage their channels and communication when someone actually does opt in? They do that magic golden moment where they do opt in for personalized communication. What's your advice on that transition?
It's a good question. I try to think about like a consumer anyway, right? An average consumer, not like us or anything, but when I think about that question you asked, and I'm just starting from the beginning, is I think if you're going to be exposed to advertising, I'd rather have it related to me, right? If I had to choose, and it's kind of like a contradiction, of this privacy thing. Yet I'm gonna see like ads that aren't related to me, right? Because I don't, it's like. And then we could talk about it more. I mean, this is more philosophical, right? About what kind of messaging you want to get. So that's one point really is, maybe companies overthink this because consumers, if they're going to see marketing, our job as media buyers is to target people more likely to pay attention to a message, right? So, and I think consumers would want that as well if they had a choice, but that's just my opinion, right? And the other thing is, when you get into the data and everything, now we're talking about two kinds of opt-in. Dan was talking about forms, which usually has like the little checkbox at the bottom, you're going to get promotional offers, right? Versus, non-leads, which is basically, that's where you get to like retargeting, things like that, right? And so, you can answer that again. The omni-channel way is basically saying, we haven't done a conversion yet, but maybe we should customize our retargeting messaging based on user behavior, right? Like I know what different platforms I use, visiting one page and bouncing may not be somebody I want to retarget because they decide, nope, not for me, right? Or maybe there's another way to do it where you're, I know if Google Analytics and all those things target, 2 or 3 page visits, but they didn't convert. So maybe they've been researching more, but they're just not ready to make a decision yet. So maybe we send them like an offer, right? Or something to close the deal if they haven't made a decision yet. That's what retargeting is all about. Especially with e-commerce, you target, various pages you visit and then segment those audiences. But, again, you're really creating like a funnel here, of like how many pages I visited, but I didn't put anything into a cart. Then I put something into a cart, but I didn't buy yet, and all that. Then if you buy something, then they get to your CRM, then you're doing, cross-sell, upsell, whatever, right? So I guess the bottom line is, if we're talking about all this data is, whether it's your CRM or customer data platform, whatever, is like, have specific segmenting, have a strategy for that user behavior as they engage with you in that process. Does this make sense?
Yeah, no, I get that, and I think that that's very fair, because there's a moment where a user actually does opt in, and that's different than someone who doesn't opt in. So, I mean, I guess, David, I'll ask you from an agency perspective that literally does it all. Bluewater crosses it all. When do you avoid or lean into channels if a user has intentionally opted out of an email, but are still good prospects, kind of to David's point, where they might not have completely committed, but you still think that they're a good prospect to continue to target?
Yeah, I think when I saw that, when I kind of think about that question, think about what that means, I guess the first question you really have to ask yourself is, are they actually a good prospect, right? Because like, I think the question, like, well, if they are a good prospect, but like, what do you have in place to know that answer, right? Because frequently opt-in lists, you don't opt in until you've either purchased something. A lot of times there's an incentive, right? You're leveraging an offer, you're leveraging some kind of a coupon, you're leveraging some kind of an insider information piece to get them to give you their contact information. Mm-hmm. As direct marketers, we always say that person's raised their hand. They've said, yes, I'm interested. I want to be a part of your brand. I want to be a part of the conversation. I'm okay with you talking to me. If they have intentionally raised their hand and put it down, right? I do think as marketers, the first question I have to ask is, are they actually a good prospect? Because they've intentionally said, you know what, I don't want to hear from you. So then it kind of opens up, and these are the questions that we look at our clients with, which are, one, right? Like, did we abuse the process, right? Did we talk too much, right? Did we abuse the privilege that we were given? Did they let us opt into SMS and we sent them 6 SMS messages in 4 days, right? Is that on us, right? Is that our fault? Mm-hmm. But then also too, to your point, like where are they in that consumer funnel, Paul? Like, were they existing clients and customers that had already purchased, had opted in, then opted out? Well, at that point in time, they might be a little more qualified to go after than someone who opted in for a special offer, but then never actually converted. I think what we're finding with our clients and what the conversations we're having now are, how do we build customer profiles, right, that help us have a better understanding of someone is a good prospect or not? What markers are we collecting that we know maybe universally, leveraging things like questionnaires, forms, interactive pieces on websites, right, to know something about them that tells us, yeah, this is a good customer, right? This is someone that we should continue to go after. And if all those boxes are checked, if you as a brand, if you're building that customer profile, if you have the data and the understanding to know that, yes, there's still a reason to go after them, just because they've opted out of email, to your point, there are opportunities to lean into other platforms to find them. Programmatic platforms are an excellent way to be able to target customers that you have partial data profiles on. Same thing with Facebook, still to a limited degree. There are still opportunities to get them. So I think it's kind of a double-edged sword, right? Yes, there are reasons to lean in, but before you lean in, you have to make sure you have the processes and the data collection protocols at either a zero-party data or first-party data side to be able to answer that question of, yes, these customers are worth continuing to invest valuable media dollars in.
Well, I love that. It's an excellent answer, David. I also love your phrasing where you said, you don't want to abuse the privilege of communicating with customers. I love that idea that if a customer says yes, that becomes actually a privilege for the brand, and they need to caretake right, with that relationship and that communication. And so often now communications are in a mobile environment, right? Most of the marketing is happening that way. We know most consumers are that way. We'll get to Generation Z in a little bit. So Dan, I guess I would ask you, in a mobile-first consumer marketing world, do you look to collect data in stages over multiple touches, or maybe go for broke in that initial contact to try to bring it all in?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen it all over the place. I think the key word is balance, especially if you're on a mobile phone. I got the big thumbs and the hard to see, so it's, typing all that stuff in there is not as easy as using a keyboard. But I think probably the standard thing is that trade-off that I mentioned earlier. Getting just that basic level of information so that you can continue to market to somebody. And now, obviously, with the apps and the cloud-based systems and platforms, you can capture information and build the beginnings of an account, and then continue to mine for additional information and preferences over time as you build that account up and interact with customers. So there's definitely multiple ways of doing it, whether it's a single form with everything in the kitchen sink, or multi-forms, or just some sort of an access to a larger account.
I like that idea too, because what I've seen also are these step forms, right? Where maybe there's a couple of things and then I hit next. So it still captures that first initial stuff. And then if I bail after, and then I still have the information, but then the user has the choice of going next and giving you more information in those environments. And then, as that happens, of course, there's, an implication of what they're going to share and different privacy legislations. And Emma, you touched on it, but I'd like to drill in and go back into that now. This might be an incorrect assumption, but I'm assuming that nothing's going to happen nationally during an election year 2024. I might be wrong, and if I am, please let me know. But are you seeing any comprehensive policy legislation kind of akin to the states? Like we have CCPA here in California, and other states have initiatives, but do you see any national program, national level type of legislation happening in the next couple of years?
I think it's entirely possible. I think you're probably right, although I'd be delighted to be proven wrong, that next year is not our best prospect for comprehensive federal privacy legislation, although there's some possibility of it, of course, and there's some possibility of children's privacy legislation that's really on Congress's mind quite a bit. But privacy is a bipartisan issue. There's a lot of members of Congress in the House and the Senate, both sides of the aisle, that are really interested in working on this. Of course, then it's a matter of working out the details, but that should be tough, right? It should be tough to work out the details and come up with something that we can all live with, hopefully. And I think it's a focus. It's an issue that creates a lot of wins for a lot of people. So if that's yes.
I'd like to lean in a little bit more, Emma. If that's true, what are the implications you think for your clients or some of the larger brands that are in the business of data collection?
Well, I think we can expect to see some of the same things that are in the state privacy laws, right? You can expect to see some sort of opt-out regime, maybe some opt-ins, maybe a layered approach. I'm not going to say what it'll be, but I think you can expect to see something about opt-outs. You can expect to see consumer rights. You can expect to see some provisions about the notice that is required to consumers, things like that. I think a lot of the core requirements of those state laws will probably be imported, but I can't give you the details. If I could, be making a lot more money somewhere.
I love it. No, that's a great answer. It actually is a very optimistic answer. So I appreciate that. So Paul, one of the things that we do know is that we do have the ability to stitch together some more data. So to Dan's earlier comment of, hey, just ask for email first, and then we'll build that relationship and gather more data as it moves along. We have the ability to attach a lot of things to an email and append to an email. And once that email is opted in, the append is okay because it's the original opt-in. So do you advise clients, maybe if they have an email or just a little piece of data, like David had talked about, just a couple of pieces, do you advise them to fill in and append the rest of the data themselves via third party? Or to organically build that with the client and let the client share that?
Well, yeah, I mean, before I answer that question, I'll just tell Emma that Google's going to probably delay cookie depreciation again. Anyway, you know, speaking of privacy, but you know, I guess like the I mean, when I get down to it, you know, I mean, so what we're talking about here is like anti-e-commerce, right? You know, we're talking about lead forms. That's another kind of a lead generation that's not a purchase, right? Because that's what we're getting into here. Because obviously, if you're buying something or not, I mean, that's it. But if you're doing like a lead gen program, like the university client I have or whatever, you know, where you want to capture something, whether it's a guide download or a free consultation, free trial, whatever it is, you know, that's where you start getting, you know, into like data strategy, right? Like how much, you know, the old, you know, adage about too many fields and people are going to leave. And you know, how important is the phone number? Do you have to have the asterisk? You know what I mean? Like, you know, so salespeople can call them, right? We can look them up now anyway. But the point though is, I think it's, you know, I just say it's a balance, and I always like to have an intent question. You know, I've done this before, and the intent is basically, where are you in the buying cycle? Are you looking to buy 3 months, or are you just researching? I mean, whatever the product is, right? Because then you can start segmenting and prioritizing, you know, we call them leads, right? You know, to salespeople or whatever the next step is. Because obviously, if, you know, some people may not check the box at all, right? But at least it's a starting point. So I guess, I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, Chris. I mean, it's a strategy, you know, when I talk to clients is, you know, is what's the most important data you need from the first step? And then, you know, what's the offer, you know, and maybe it is a coupon or for a future date or whatever it is. And, you know, how do you want to be communicated? Would you, I mean, even if you like a text update, you got to make sure all that legalese is there, right? And with a text platform, right? But again, so you don't want to overdo it either, because you know how it is. Another thing I wanted to mention, you know, as far as privacy, we've all seen those. Maybe we avoid them, but I always tell people, you see that ad too much? There's a little tiny box on the right side of it usually, right? Where you can get to click it and say, I don't want to see this ad anymore. Facebook does it, you know, a lot of ad platforms do it. So that's more of like a personal way to say, too much exposure, you know, your frequency cap is not right, you know, or something. But so there's lots of ways to do that, I guess, and to, you know, to manage all of that. I'm not sure if I answered the total question here, but that's my philosophy.
I think you answered it enough, because I think one of the things you talked about was kind of what is the data that you want in that first step, and to work with the clients, because the ability to stitch data together is better than ever, but it's a question of what the tolerance for that brand is. And then to what all of you have talked about is what you can actually feel comfortable in reaching the customer. And the kind of the frequency of those touches, you know. And I guess David will wrap it up with you and ask this last question about the next generation, right? So Generation Z is our very first mobile first environment. 98% of them own smartphones. Generation Alpha, which comes underneath them, doesn't know a life without these devices. How do you think, and this is more of a prognostication or just your insights from what you've seen from behaviors from this group of buyers, how do you think these consumers are going to respond to opt-in choices and the transparency they have with brands?
I think it's always true that every generation asks something a little different from brands than the previous generation, right? I'm not going to age anyone here, right? But I would say, you know, anyone who's an Xer or millennial or anything, to assume that they don't all have cell phones as well. It's less the access to the devices, right? Because everyone has that. It's more what that generation wants in terms of a conversation, right? In a relationship with the brand. What we're finding is just like the one thing that is similar amongst all generations is that you have to add value in order to get contact information, right? You can't just say, hey, send me your contact information, right? People will willingly give it to you if you provide value. And that value doesn't always have to be monetary value. It can be information, it can be expertise, it can be a recommendation. But once you've established trust, right? Once you've established a reason to start that conversation with a consumer, the biggest difference we're seeing with the younger generation is that, you know, they want to have this like relationship with the brand, right? As opposed to the previous generations that maybe were a little bit more focused on utility, you know, focused on the fact that, like, I like this product, it does this for me, it does it better than anyone else, right? I'm going to keep buying it because it solves my problem. Yes, that is obviously still important for that younger generation, but it's like they want a plus, right? They want a plus up, which is they also want that brand to kind of align with their overall lifestyle, with their overall like beliefs and values. And I think that that's a challenge for brands, because those have always been the things that you say to yourself, I'm going to stay away from, right? Like I'm going to stay away from drawing too hard a line in the sand. And we're not advising our clients to go out and start just getting on a soapbox and preaching here, right? But at the same time, you have to find a voice that aligns with that overall, with your customers' overall desires of how they integrate products into their lifestyle. And that, again, it speaks to who they are, not just what it can do for them.
Oh, I love that answer. And I think you're right. I think that the younger generations and all the studies have indicated that they support brands who align with their own values and their social issues. And that's over 2/3, right? It's a huge majority. And the opting in to communications to a brand becomes not just transactional, but becomes meaningful.
It opens up a huge opportunity for niche products and niche brands that may not have existed up until this point.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I love it.
I'll throw you 2 words about this whole thing with the messaging: creative and relevant. Then I'm not gonna have much of a problem, right?
So this has been a fantastic discussion, you guys. We really appreciate all of your insights. And Johnny, we are at 11:30, so it's not just a take 20. This is going to be a take 30 plus. Speaking of extra value, come on. It is bringing even more value, more plus to the Take 20.
Always delivering extra value, Chris. That's what we love about you, my friend. We got some great questions here for you, and feel free to jump in, any one of the 4 of you, as you deem fit. Let's start with a compliance question. If a potential consumer opts in to receive more information from one medium, such as email, is the advertiser legally able to communicate with that potential customer or consumer from all forms of marketing, like SMS or outbound calling,
I'm assuming that's a question for me.
Yes,
you're probably the best suited, hence the compliance question.
We're all waiting. We're like, Emma, what's the answer?
Well, normally I shy away from answering specific compliance questions like that, but what I'll say is that you should be really cautious about that approach, because typically it's not going to be sufficient.
Interesting. So you ultimately get access to whatever they agree to receive it from.
Yes, if you specify, right, I'm signing up for emails, and then you send them a text message, that's
not what they signed up for. And I think if that person has any further questions, they should contact Emma Blaser at Venable, a consultation with that fantastic firm to help them make the right choices.
All right, let's try maybe a little bit of an easier one, one that everybody can jump in on here. Earlier this week, California's privacy regulatory body floated an idea that would limit companies' use of first-party data for advertising, including restrictions on the use of algorithms to compile ad profiles. What could further stringent data restrictions like these mean to performance marketers' ability to do their jobs in the future?
That's crushing, to be honest with you, right? Like it's crushing. Like that's the concept of you can't even market to people that you have permission to market to. Like I get the concept of what legislators are trying to accomplish. They're trying to create a world where people can have some kind of a safety net. But like this is like seems to be getting like one step beyond that. So I mean, obviously with technology, there's a lot of things that answers can come, and you can leverage things like cohorts and opportunities to anonymize data. But the concept behind that is it's going to be there's going to have to be a lot of innovation to jump over that that hurdle.
Great
Yeah,
feedback.
Yeah, I agree completely. And I think one of the things that I also would posit is that it's not actually best for the customers, right? To Paul's point and some of the themes and the motifs of this discussion, relevancy is important. People don't mind getting advertising, right? People like getting advertising. They discover new products and they discover things that they didn't know that they always wanted. And it's because of the relevancy of that product and the message and how you align that communication. So the more restrictions on using data to create a more relevant communication actually harms the consumers too.
Emma, I would throw this at you. If something like this were to go into play, is there something an association like the PDMI could do to help their brands and advertisers and partners kind of fight back against such restrictions?
Could we fight back against those restrictions after the law was passed? That's tough.
Well, yeah.
That's
maybe
tough.
maybe to step up before they're actually in stone.
We can definitely help with that.
Alrighty, let's try one more question, and here we go. I'm hearing a lot about avoiding chasing consumers who have indicated disinterest in messaging. At what point do you advise your clients to cut their losses when mining data for consumers who don't want their advertisements? So along the way, when somebody's looking, oh, I'm going to keep sending my messaging, they're on the fringe, and then they kind of understand maybe they're not interested. At what point do you guys say, hey, just walk away from that customer? Let's go find you somebody new. Nobody walks away.
David,
I was trying to do all the talking, so I was just trying to give some space.
I don't know if this is an answer to the question, but eventually those ads are going to stop, right? Like maybe like what Facebook did because of Apple, like there's, I guess it's calling like the look back window of targeting people, right? So, you know, Facebook 7 days, so you won't see anything after 7 typically, but I don't know if I'm answering the question right, but I guess like it's retargeting is like a necessary evil right now, but it's not forever. I mean, it'll change, and it all depends on how your frequency cap mixed with the attribution model you set up, or the look back windows in your when you set up the tracking pixels, right? If you kind of slow that down and not be aggressive and don't even allow the platforms to do it automatically, and be and then mix that with again, compelling messaging, but also know that you put all those factors together, it's not going to be as crazy as we think. It's just a matter of just how you set up the tracking platforms, and from a technical standpoint, so that you're not overstepping bounds of too many messages out there. Because then people get a bad. And the big picture is not everybody's ready to buy right away. They are intrigued. So, but that's a little bit of an intent right there, right? So that's why we do all this. But doing it too much, then I said then that's where the bad taste comes in. Does that make sense?
You can also scrub lists. I mean, our clients have we set up with them very specific, basically like processes that come into play, so that at a certain time people age out of lists based on open rates, based on propensity to purchase. If you're depending on how much consumer data you have, especially if you have a CDP in play, there's a lot of ways where you can leverage algorithms and strategic mining of that data to determine where those fall offs are and make intelligent choices about it. I mean, you can always just draw a line and say like, hey, if they haven't opened an email for 10 times, we're going to put them off the list, or at least put them in a place where we're going to come back to them later. But you can get very, very strategic about it and understand what the typical life cycle is of a repurchase purchase or how you can drive LTV and do LTV projections, and then apply that to your marketing lists to make sure that, to your point, like, okay, I've spent enough time on this prospect or this person that I'm willing to let them go to save space on the list, or just to not be that annoying brand that everyone, starts to hate.
Every email needs to have an unsubscribe link, and so the consumer can just make that decision,
And maybe to answer the person's question, John, to David's point, there's no hard definitive rule, right? 15 touches and they don't respond, they're out. I don't think that that's appropriate. I think that every brand has a different relationship with that client base, and it could be things like timing, it could be seasonal. We all know that there are times when we're not interested in a brand, and then something happens in your life that changes and you're re-interested and you come back. So
what if you sell mattresses? Like, how frequently, like, I could send you like 6 mattress ads. Once you bought one, you're not going to buy another one for another couple of years,
Yeah, or something with a large price point, like an automobile, right? So I think it's all kind of that balance, and maybe it's even looking at your own data, right? As you start to create these campaigns and send stuff out, you can establish a baseline of what's acceptable and try and beat that. And if someone hasn't opted out, thanks but no thanks, you continue to market to them. And to David's point, it's about finding that common value point and building that trust so that they are willing to engage at some point. Maybe not the first one or the second one, but some subsequent touch point.
That makes sense to me.
Great feedback, guys. I'm going to come back in here and join you. Thank you so much today, Emma, Dan, Paul, David, Chris. What a great conversation. Well, folks, I hope you all enjoyed today's conversation as much as I did and learned as much as I did. Before we close out, I'd like to take a moment to invite each and every one of you to join us at the next episode of the PDMI Take 20, which will be hosted on Wednesday, December 13th at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. I'd also like to let you know that both registration and housing for the PDMI Spring Conference, PDMI East, scheduled for April 8th through 10 in Miami, is now open. As a reminder, there's no better way to support the PDMI event than by purchasing your attendee badges and staying on site at the host hotel. To get your attendee badges and to get your hotel room, please visit thepdmi.com. That's thepdmi.com. Thanks again, everyone, and all of our speakers today. We appreciate your time, your energy, your effort, and all the value you brought to the conversation. Make it a great day, everyone, and talk to you soon. Thanks.